topic today is called Adapting the Principles course for the Post-Millennial generation. And the goal here is to look at some of the trends in which the way students are learning information today, and also the new ways in which instructors are teaching. So when I talk about the post-millennial generation, today's principal student has been born typically in the mid-90s. So this is the group that didn't really experience the hype of the early 90s when we were talking about the development of the information superhighway. In fact, the highway was already built, and now it's even being repaved over and over. And so these are the students in which some of these older technologies are no longer relevant to them. They've rarely seen payphones, rarely have anyone used a pager before. Ask your students if anyone actually used a physical map to figure out how to get from one point or the other. And honestly, overhead projectors, it's surprising how long it took before even academia started to get rid of those, because we still see them sometimes in some of the conferences. But the point is that students are quickly adapting to all these, well, they grew up with all these technologies, but for most of their teachers, they grew up in a different time, not using these technologies. So sometimes it often creates a disconnect between the students and the instructor. So it puts the pressure on the instructor to do the best they can to adapt as well to keep up with the current times. The students today are really accustomed to online learning. Some of my students are completely comfortable taking online quizzes and tests, even exams, on their smartphones. It's like, how in the world can you answer an entire exam or even type in essay questions on your phone and still manage to do it within the hour? So it's incredible to them, the way they have gained knowledge and the way they've received information, has really, to them, this is second nature to them. They haven't seen it really any other way. And at the same time, universities have really adapted as well with increased enrollments, reduced budgets and faculty lines. We've seen this nationwide trend to have more and more online courses, and also those instructors who are at the cutting edge of creating new ways of teaching online are really those that are becoming the most valuable on the market. So I want to give you a brief overview of what we do at Florida Atlantic University, because a few years ago, we decided to the College of Business have really put an effort to expand our lecture capture offerings. This is really, for the instructor, a low investment way of teaching online. For myself, I teach in a studio. This is actually my classroom studio at FAU. We have two of these custom-built studios. Each would hold about 50 students. And this semester, I have about 400 students enrolled in my class. So approximately 10% of my students are in the classroom listening to me live. Another, I'd say 10 or 20% are watching me via live streaming. So they're watching the class as it's being taped, but in a different location. And then the rest of the class is watching me on a recorded at their own time. And each of the rooms have their control rooms with at least 2 staff members operating the system, making sure everything works well, and then processing the videos into the many different formats for Max, for Flash, for high def, for low def, all the different formats that end up being provided for students to actually watch the lectures at a later time. So when you teach in a lecture capture room, students are seeing all the slides like they would in a typical face-to-face classroom. They're seeing the instructor up in the corner. And also, if you were to write things on the board, typically I would write right on the screen. So really, students are seeing everything as if they were sitting right in the front. And one thing I found is that when I teach online in a lecture capture room, just like Alex Tabarrok mentioned, it sometimes allows me to progress, typically allows me to progress faster through the material. Not because I'm speaking any faster or that I'm not discussing issues with my students, but when you teach online, you have less of a need to repeat definitions and concepts, and also it requires less time pausing for students to write down what you're saying. Because if they're watching online, they can always push the pause button or the rewind button. We sort of followed the approach taken by 2 other of our sister schools here in Florida, the University of Florida and University of Central Florida. University of Florida and Central Florida are 2 largest universities in Florida. They have 2 of the biggest business schools in the state and some of the largest in the country. And at the University of Florida, they offer 13 courses in the College of Business using this lecture capture technology, accommodating over 11,000 students. So you can just do the math, and it's like each class typically has upwards of 1,000 students enrolled for one instructor. At the University of Central Florida, they have 15 courses, and the last count I received was over 13,000 students taking a lecture capture class. At Florida Atlantic University, we've only started lecture capture about 3 years ago. Our enrollments are relatively lower, and one of the reasons is that our provost has required us, when we offer a lecture capture class, to also offer at least one face-to-face section, so that students are not required to take courses in this format, because it's not for everyone. Okay? Some students really learn better in a face-to-face environment. So at FAU, we always have a choice. And so we would have 400 students in my lecture capture class, but there could also be 300 students taking a face-to-face class in a large auditorium. So some of the benefits of lecture capture are very clear. Obviously, the advantage of students is that you can stop, you can rewind, you can rewatch lectures. Some of my best students say that they come to my class because they love to have that face-to-face interaction, but they never take notes. They sit there and take it all in because they know that they can go home and watch that lecture again. And that's a huge benefit of lecture capture. And of course, there's scheduling advantages, and students who are on active duty and they have to take courses out of the country. And of course, every year, since our enrollment is growing, our parking problem is getting worse and worse. So the students are always looking for new ways to avoid coming to campus. But it's not only for students that are benefiting through online courses and lecture capture. I find as an instructor teaching in this format that when I have 400 students, but I'm only seeing about 40 who come into the classroom studio to watch the live taping, I tend to get the very best students in that room. These are the students that if you're teaching in a large 400-person auditorium, they're the ones that are usually sitting in the front row. They're the ones that usually are raising their hand and paying attention and participating. So what's happening is you're teaching to a very good group of students, and the rest of the class, who typically would not be participating, and they might be on their phones, and they might be coming in late and leaving, and they have the advantage of learning the way they want to, which is having the convenience of watching it from home. So I think as an instructor, it's really a great way to be able to teach to a group that are really excited about coming to class, and then the rest of the class benefits as a result. I'm not going to spend too much time on the research behind online and lecture capture because there's been so much of it. The three schools that I mentioned, University of Florida, Central Florida, and FAU, each has done a major study comparing the differences between performance of students in live face-to-face classes versus a lecture capture setting. Okay? I want to mention one more issue before I turn to the next part of the talk, and that's about cheating. Because there's a lot of talk about whether online courses increases the amount of academic dishonesty in the courses. Now I know other schools that have lecture capture would typically have large testing centers, like UCF has a fantastic testing center. The University of Florida would bring most of their students onto campus, for example, on the evenings or weekends to take exams all together in various auditoriums. At FAU, we've had to rely on online testing, okay, because our testing center is not large enough to accommodate at this time all the students, and also we have too many night classes to have the rooms available at night for every student to come on. So we've really had to rely on online testing techniques to do our best to minimize cheating. And so, yes, cheating will occur, but we do our best to make sure that the cheating is no bigger of a problem compared to a face-to-face class. And so some of the best practices that we looked at, and we've sort of encouraged our faculty, there's 15 of faculty teaching in lecture capture this semester, to use some of the popular techniques to minimize cheating in online testing. And one is to use, obviously, large question pools. And not only use large question pools, but to create new questions as often as possible. In fact, one of my task that I ask my TAs to do each semester is I want them to create new questions. I think it's a good experience, and it's a thrill for them to write questions and then see the results that students taking their own question. Randomizing the exams in the order and the drawing from the pool. Make sure the testing time is relatively limited, particularly the range of the time that students can actually log on to take the exam. Because one of the arguments about cheating is that you can do all these things to prevent cheating, but you can't prevent a student from hiring a tutor to take the exam for them. Okay? In fact, there's rumors that there might be the new businesses and entrepreneurs coming up that they are professional test takers. So in my class, I typically narrow the time frame in which students can log in and take the exam to between 3 and 7 o'clock. So there's a 4-hour period, so that even if that does occur, a student cannot take 10 exams because there's simply not enough of a time frame to log on that many times. Whether you're teaching online or whether you're teaching in a face-to-face setting, the post-millennial generation, they grew up with video games and internet, and they're used to seeing graphics that are very visually appealing. And so sometimes when when students go into a classroom where the presentation is rather dull, it seems like they're stepping a little bit back in time. So it's really important that there's many technologies available to help you convey information, to induce participation, and to make learning to this new generation as engaging and as exciting as possible. In addition to polling, there's iClickers. I enjoy the fact that the responses can be exported right into a grade book. But what I enjoy about Poll Everywhere is that when I'm teaching online, students who are watching from home can still participate in a live poll at the same time as students who are in the classroom. So there's actually interaction between students in the classroom and those watching at home. And many students find that truly fascinating. Here is an example of how I might use a polling question to develop an economic concept. So before I teach the demand curve, instead of just drawing this downward sloping curve and saying, here's the demand curve, I will actually ask my students, what would you pay for a slice of pizza right now? And they would participate, using their phones or tablets, and those at home would text in. And from that, I would develop a demand curve, giving students an opportunity to see that demand curves are not just some abstract curve, but rather it's based on actual data that can be collected from real people. And so it really gives students an idea that demand curves are built off of willingness to pay, which are the building blocks for a market demand curve. And using these technologies is a great way to do that.